The year is 421 BCE, and the Peace of Nicaeus has just been put into force. Athens and Sparta have both agreed to it, albeit with many of their allies only begrudgingly approving the peace or outright rejecting it. As neither side had fully won the war, the situation was still tense. As such, violence continued sporadically. Thucydides continued to describe each year in between 422 and 414 BCE, when the second phase of the war officially began, revealing much about the geopolitics of this time. How did the interlude of the Peloponnesian War unfold? How did Athens and Sparta act? Welcome to our video on the Peloponnesian War's interlude and the dramatic events in between the full-blown conflict. This series on the Peloponnesian War is kindly sponsored by our YouTube members and patrons, and the series has been initially released as an exclusive for our supporters. Right now, the patrons and YouTube members are watching our first Punic War and Pacific War series, while the series on the history of Prussia and Italian unification wars, Risorgimento, have been concluded, and our series on the Russo-Japanese War and Albigensian Crusade and Xenophon's Anabasis will be released next. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and pinned comment to get exclusive videos, early access to all public videos, see our schedule, access a special Discord server in which we are very active, and much more. Thank you for supporting us, we couldn't be doing it without your help. The Peace of Nicaeus was not accepted by all actors within each alliance. The Boeotians and Megarians, for instance, had not taken the oaths of peace. Various Thracian colonies, which had to return to a quasi-Athenian rule, were also negatively disposed towards the peace deal. Corinth and Thebes were both the most influential cities who opposed the peace. Corinth's grievances with Athens had not been resolved, while Thebes was burgeoning with aggressive ambition after their conquest of Plataea. This put Sparta in a difficult situation, for they were no longer the most influential member of their own alliance, and were more restrained by their allies than Athens. Other members of the Peloponnesian League, like Argos and Mantinea, began to drift away from Sparta, unofficially throwing their lot in with Athens. Nicaeus understood that political trouble in mainland Greece would hinder Athenian interests and expansion elsewhere, so they were eager to build a stable peace on land to recuperate from the war. Corinth, Athens' mercantile nemesis, was not having this and proceeded to go to Argos to build a third political pole against both the Apella and the Agora. Moreover, they threatened to secede from the Peloponnesian League in order to intimidate Sparta into listening to their demands. Sparta was terrified of this potentiality. If enough forces were to break off and join an Argive pact, they would destroy Sparta's geopolitical security. The Corinthians brought themselves before an assembly of powerful Argives and offered them some proposals for alliance, which the Argives readily accepted. Soon, other cities like Mantinea had also joined this new Corinthian-led coalition. When Sparta got wind of this, they were outraged. Corinth also tried to get Boeotia to join the alliance, but if Boeotia broke from Sparta, it would lose its protection against Athens, so this never materialized. Tensions between Athens and Boeotia increased when Boeotia demolished the fortress of Panactum instead of returning it to Athens as the Peace of Nicaeus dictated. Following this, Athens and Argos began negotiations for a military alliance. A pro-war party backed this development in Athens, led by Hyperbolus and a certain Alcibiades, the nephew of Pericles, who would become immensely important throughout the rest of this war. Alcibiades utilized the demolition of Panactum to push his pro-war agenda, managing to sideline the pro-peace Nicaeus in the Agora. Alcibiades claimed Sparta was not upholding their end of the peace, and struck an alliance with Mantinea, Argos and Elis. Athens used these partnerships to promote itself as a champion of democracy among the Peloponnesian cities. In 418 BCE, this new alliance of democracies attacked Epidaurus, a strategically important city that would geopolitically isolate Corinth once taken. The Spartans responded swiftly and soon faced off against the Argives and their Athenian allies outside Argos proper. However, rather than fight, Agis II, king of Sparta, opted to negotiate, leading to a peaceful resolution and him leading his troops home. However, the Spartan people were furious about this and demanded that aggression be met with aggression. Thus, the Lacedaemonian hoplites marched back to war. After taking Epidaurus, the Argives marched on to the city of Tegea, which sent messengers asking for help, otherwise they would switch sides. The Spartans reacted quickly, with King Agis amassing an army that Thucydides calls the finest in Greece, composed of about 9,000 men in total, including 3,500 Spartans, 600 Sciritae, 2,000 Neodamodes, and 3,000 Tegean allies and cavalry. Conversely, the Argive army was about 8,000, including 3,000 Argives, 1,000 Athenian hoplites plus cavalry, 2,000 Mantineans, 1,000 mercenary Arcadians, and 1,000 Cleonaeans, Onaeans, and Aegetans. King Agis went to Mantinea near Argos and began to raid the region. The Argives set up positions on the hill near Mantinea, but Agis had his ditch diggers change the watercourse in the valley, forcing Argos to move. The allied Argives descended from the hill and set up their wings. The Mantineans were on the right, next to the Arcadians, while the Argives were in the center. Further left were the Cleonaeans and Onaeans, and the Athenian infantry and cavalry were on the very left. When the allied army came into view of the Spartans, Agis immediately ordered his men to form battle lines. The left comprised the Sciritae, the Spartans, and some freed helots. Next came the Arcadians, then the Maenalians and Tegeans. An additional small force of Spartans made up the right, while cavalry guarded both wings. The two armies clashed when they met, spreading out their right wings. Agis moved the Sciritae leftward, while ordering Spartans to fill in the gap. The Spartans defeated the Argive advantage quickly, but on the left flank, the Mantineans crushed the Scitaeans and Thracians. The Argive troops and Mantineans moved to crush the Spartan troops and inflicted heavy losses, causing them to retreat. However, King Agis held the line bravely in the center, preventing a total Spartan rout. Thus, the Spartans defeated the central contingents, while the right flank managed to outflank the Athenians. It was only the Athenian cavalry that saved the infantry from complete encirclement. Agis ordered his army to cover the left, which allowed the Athenians to flee. The Argives and their allies suffered heavy losses during the battle. The Argives lost 700 men, the Mantineans 200, and the Athenians and Aeginetans 200, including their two generals, Laches and Nicostratos. Spartan losses were rather lower, at just over 300. They chased the Athenians from Epidaurus, only after getting a truce with Argos. In the following year, the Argives made peace with Sparta, ending their attempt to dominate the Peloponnese. With Argos gone, the rest of the anti-Spartan alliance collapsed. Despite facing each other on the battlefield, Sparta and Athens were still officially at peace, with no terms of the Peace of Nicaeus being breached. After the Battle of Mantinea, the peace which endured between Athens and Sparta was more strained than ever, and the inner politics of both cities were tense. In Athens, Nicaeus and Alcibiades both narrowly avoided ostracism, a form of exile. After sidestepping this potential banishment, Nicaeus focused on launching expeditions into Chalkidiki to retake land seized by the Spartan general Brasidas years prior. In Sparta, King Agis continued his skillful military management. Not 1 year after the Battle of Mantinea, Argos rebelled once more. With help from Alcibiades, the Argives evicted their oligarchs and tried to establish a democracy, which naturally would be pro-Athens. In response, Agis dashed to Argos once more. He did not take the city, but destroyed Argos's long walls, which linked the city to its port. He then took the hill of Hesiae, where a Hanonymous town was situated, and executed all of its male population. Sometime afterwards, the Spartans settled the Argive oligarchs in their offshore paradise of Orne, a hilly town they conquered in 417 BC. They began a proxy war through these Argive exiles, fighting against Argos. In response, Argos and Athens united. With 40 triremes and 1,200 hoplites, They besieged the city of Orne, taking it after a fierce siege, in which the Argive exiles within were either executed or expelled. As 416 BCE came to the fore, polarization in Athens continued, with both pro-war and pro-peace generals being re-elected. By now, Athens had replenished its finances and was eager to try to expand its interests. A border region between the two leagues, the island of Milos, was fated by the Olympians and the Three Fates as the victim of Athens' wrath. This is one of the most famous of Thucydides' excerpts, and is one that has sparked immortal lessons and fierce debate. Milos was a Spartan colony in the Cyclades that had stayed neutral, and may have funded the Spartans during the Archidamian War. Athens sailed upon the island with 300 ships, 1,200 hoplites, 300 archers, and 20 mounted archers. Their allies sent 8 ships and 1,500 hoplites. They surrounded the isle and began a blockade. They also burned the fields around the island, which resulted in a famine. Following all this, the Athenians sent an envoy to implore the Melians to surrender without a fight. Here we see the infamous Melian dialogue unfold. The Melians answered by invoking their neutrality, saying how unwise it would be for Athens to besiege an island such as theirs, which had done no harm to them. They also described how they could not submit without a fight, as it would be dishonorable. Melians. To the fairness of quietly instructing each other as you propose, there is nothing to object, but your military preparations are far too advanced to agree with what you say, as we see you are come to be judges in your own cause, and all that we can reasonably expect from this negotiation is war, if we prove to have right on our side and refuse to submit, and in the contrary case, slavery. Athens replied that they would attack because they had the power of might on their side, and that it would be foolish to resist. Athenians. For ourselves, we shall not trouble you with specious pretenses, either of how we have a right to our empire because we overthrew the Mede, or now we are attacking you because of wrong that you have done us, and make a long speech which would not be believed. And in return, we hope that you, instead of thinking to influence us by saying that you did not join the Lacedaemonians, although they're colonists, or that you have done us no wrong, will aim at what is feasible, holding in view the real sentiments of us both, since you know as well as we do that right, as the world goes, is only in question between equals in power, while the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Melians. As we think, at any rate, it is expedient, we speak that we are obliged, since you enjoin us to let right alone and talk only of interest, that you should not destroy what is our common protection, the privilege of being allowed in danger to invoke what is fair and right, and even to profit by arguments not strictly valid if they can be got to pass current. And you are as much interested in this as any, as your fall would be a signal for the heaviest vengeance and an example for the world to meditate upon. The Melians asked why they should surrender and not fight, to which the Athenians replied that they would be spared a worse fate of complete decimation. They continued by saying that friendship with Milos was not enough, as it would make them appear weak amongst allies. Athenians. As far as right goes, they think one has as much of it as the other, and that if any maintain their independence, it is because they are strong, and that if we do not molest them, it is because we are afraid, so that besides extending our empire, we should gain in security by your subjection. The fact that you are islanders and weaker than others rendering it all the more important that you should not succeed in baffling the masters of the sea. Milos replied that they had to rely on the Peloponnese, and attacking them may risk a Peloponnesian invasion. Melians. You may be sure that we are as well aware as you of the difficulty of contending against your power and fortune, unless the terms be equal. But we trust that the gods may grant us fortune as good as yours, since we are just men fighting against unjust, and that what we want in power will be made up by the alliance of the Lacedaemonians, who are bound, if only for very shame, to come to the aid of their kindred. Our confidence, therefore, after all, is not so utterly irrational. Athenians. When you speak of the favour of the gods, we may as fairly hope for that as yourselves. neither our pretensions nor our conduct being in any way contrary to what men believe of the gods, or practice among themselves. Of the gods we believe, and of men we know, that by a necessary law of their nature they rule wherever they can. And it is not as if we were the first to make this law, or to act upon it when made. We found it existing before us, and shall leave it to exist forever after us. All we do is make use of it, knowing that you and everybody else, having the same power as we have, would do the same as we do. After an inconclusive dialogue, the Athenians left and began the siege. Milos held on for most of 416 BCE. However, they soon began to starve under blockade and were forced to surrender. The Athenian vengeance was so cruel that some modern historians have labeled it as genocide. All men of Milos were executed, and all women and children were sold into slavery. 416 BCE saw Athens become more eager for war, especially with Syracuse, whose control over Sicily they wanted to break. Nicias, always the moderate, mentioned how it would be nonsensical to go on an expedition that far west. Alcibiades, however, was eager to show his skills and considered Sicily an easy target despite its size. The Athenian agora then decided to define the war's fate, take their triremes and begin to sail to Sicily to help the city of Segesta and bring it under Athenian control. Plutarch, writing centuries later, mentions how ominous omens abounded. A madman castrated himself before the altar of the 12 with a stone. The memorial grove to Athens' victory in the Persian Wars was picked apart by ravens, and the priestess of Clazomene came to the city with the name of Hesychia, or quietude or peace. However, Alcibiades still rallied the troops and began to set sail. However, before they set sail, the Hermes statues on the Athenian crossroads were defaced, a shocking event for the city. Alcibiades' enemies accused him of being the perpetrator. Alcibiades successfully defended himself and set sail to Sicily, taking thousands of Athenians to land further west than they could have imagined. However, the Hermes scandal would continue to haunt him, and the Sicilian expedition would prove to be a turning point for the Peloponnesian War, despite not involving Sparta directly. As the defaced statues lay in the city streets, we can only imagine both the ecstasy of the expedition and the shock and fear that Athens may have felt. A fear most terrifying but far lesser than the horror the millions would have felt during their own doom. In our next episode of the Peloponnesian War, we will cover Athens' doomed venture into Sicily. To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe and press the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.